Hi, this is Andre. I want to talk about developing technique with momentary functionality on the Echoplex Digital Pro. Specifically, we're going to look at sus functions on the EDP. Sus functions mean that they are only active for as long as you hold the pedal down. And what we're going to do here is look at three different types of sus functions: sus overdub, sus replace, and sus substitute. And we're going to talk about different practice approaches that I find really useful to try and polish up my technique and get more rhythmic precision happening when I use those types of functions. Before we delve into that specifically, we're going to have a quick overview of sus functionality and a quick crash course on what that stuff means. If you already know about that, if you're already familiar with EDP functionality with regards to that, then there will be a note right below here where you can skip ahead. Otherwise, if you feel like you need a review or if this is new stuff to you, it's only a couple of minutes, but I recommend checking it out just so that you can be up to speed with what we're talking about. Okay, to start with, let's review toggle and sus functionality. There are two types of switch connections you have in most electronics. There's toggle-based and there's momentary. Momentary is referred to as sus in EDP terminology. So let's look at the difference between those two. Record is by default set to toggle. That means you hit it once, it starts recording, it's still recording, it's going to keep recording until I hit it a second time, and then when I hit it the second time, that stops it. So it's a toggle-based function. You hit it first to activate the function, you hit it a second time to deactivate the function. Now, if you come down to the second parameter row from the bottom under the record column, right now it's set to tog, T-O-G, for toggle. You can also switch it to S-U-S for sus, which is a momentary function. If we do that, then it's only going to be active for as long as I hold the pedal down. So I play a note, press it down, and as soon as I release, that finishes the recording. So instead of having two separate button presses to activate the function, with a sus function, there's just one press, and the function is active for however long you hold down the pedal. So this is my fake David Torn Hexy Revolver routine. So it's that kind of idea. So the nature of sus functionality means you can get extremely short types of sound events happening. And when I do things with sus replace, that's mainly what I'm doing. So set up just kind of a basic drone loop. This button here I have dedicated to sus replace, which will overwrite the content for as long as I hold the button down. So I'm going to play a note, sus replace release, and you can hear it gets dropped in there. And you can hear it completely overrides the stuff. If you're an old dude like me, you can think of this as being like a punch-in function on a tape deck. So that's kind of a crash course on sus and toggle functionality in the EDP. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, there's three types of sus functions we're going to be talking about. There's sus overdub, sus replace, and sus substitute. We're going to talk about overdub first. So again, just as a very brief review, this is a toggle overdub. You press it, it starts overdubbing. You press it again, it stops overdubbing. That was very demented. You can change overdub to a sus functionality on the front panel. So overdub column switches row. The default is set to toggle. You can switch it to sus. And then overdub will only be active as long as you hold it down. So slightly less demented foundation. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to sustain notes and I'm going to just do a brief tap on the overdub. You can hear it cut in there just for a second and then came out. And if I kind of go crazy with it, so one thing to listen for with this is that you can still hear that low note at the beginning. That is still ringing out. There's no point where that note is getting interrupted or overwritten or cut out. That's the nature of an overdub. And the only thing that's a little unusual about this is that we're using a sus functionality on the overdub, so you get these very short bursts of sound. But it's still overdubbing the stuff. It's not overwriting any content in the loop. It's not getting rid of anything. It's just stacking it on top. So let's do something a little more straightforward. We're going to give ourselves a bit of a click track. And let's multiply that out 4 times. So what I'm going to try and do is practice quarter note overdubs. So each one of those, let's treat each one of those kick drum sounds as a quarter note, and I'm going to try and have each of the overdubs land on one of those, and we're going to try and do it for the full quarter note duration. So that means I'm going to hold it down and then release right at the beginning of the next quarter note. Let's see how I sound. Not bad. Let's do another one. Gonna do a few more. Gonna do a few more in different places. Now I'm doing eighth notes. So that sounds reasonably good. And the thing I'm listening for is both the attack, the beginning of the overdub, and the end of the note, you know. So because it's a sus function, when you release it is going to make a big difference. If I undo back a little ways. Is that the whole thing? Nope, here we go. Nope, that's the wrong button, Andre. Well done. Okay. So if we multiply this back out, now I'm going to look at having the notes start on the same point, right on each one of those sounds, but we're going to have it be very short button presses. We're not going to think about having it sustain for an entire quarter note length. We're going to think about having it be really short and staccato. Let's see how that goes. Not bad. Not bad. The other thing I should say is that there's a difference between, undo again, there's a difference between striking the note right at the same time that you press the pedal as opposed to letting the note ring out and then pressing the pedal while the note is ringing out. So this would be an example of the latter. I'm going to play the note and then after the note is struck, I'm going to hit the overdub button. So push it, overdub. So you're not getting the natural acoustical attack of the guitar. You're getting it just a hard cut in there. Let's do a little more of that. Now I'm going to try and strike the note on the guitar at the same time that I'm hitting the overdub button. So we should, if I'm doing it right, we should be hearing more of the actual finger attack on the string. Yeah, kind of. Kind of, sort of. Little bit, let's undo a little bit. Let's try that again. Alright. There we go. Yeah, there we go. I'm finding as I'm doing this, because I don't do this that often, that there's a slight mental change. I have to think about hitting the replace button just a fraction sooner than I normally would. Let me do a little more of that. Not really. Yeah, I'm realizing as I'm doing it that I'm so used to having the duration come from the pedal that if I deliberately want to hear the attack of the note in there, I would have to do some practicing on that. I would have to do some woodshedding just to try and make that a little more readily apparent when I do it, as opposed to... Come on, undo. As opposed to this kind of thing. So the rhythm sounds okay there, but you can hear you're not hearing the acoustical attack of the string very much. On a couple of those, I guess. And again, a lot of this is also listening for the duration of the note. So if we undo yet again, thinking about the difference between having the duration be more of like a quarter note as opposed to like an eighth note. Or a very, very short staccato. A little early on that last one. When in doubt, smear it, right? That kind of idea. Alright, so let's look at sus replace. The difference between overdub and replace is that when you overdub, you're layering sounds on top of one another. When you add new sounds, they don't erase the previous sounds, or you're stacking the layers on top of each other and you're still hearing all the sounds. With replace, you're overwriting sounds when you use the function. So if I set up an initial note, and then if I tap the sus replace, which is button 4 here, even if I don't play anything, you can hear it's overriding silence. It's completely erasing what was in the loop. If I play something, then it adds in whatever I'm playing. And again, it's a sus function, so it's only for as long as I hold down the button. And if you just barely tap the button, you can get those extremely short little bursts of sound. So it's a very different feeling using replace than overdub, because as soon as you hit replace, you're no longer hearing what's in the loop. For me, I'm used to that, so I find that reasonably comfortable, but it might take some getting used to if it's not something you do a lot. So again, let's multiply this out and let's remember what the right button is. That's the right button. Very good, Andre. So now we've multiplied it out to 4 cycles again. I'm just going to try doing eighth note replaces. I think quarter notes are going to be too hard for me, so I'm going to warm up with eighth notes because that's easier, and when I start off I try and do easier stuff just to warm up. So eighth notes. Not bad. A little early in leaving it. Okay, that was a quarter note. So now I'm mainly doing quarter notes at this point. I'm going to add some eighth notes in there. So a little funky around here. See if I can cover that up with something better. A little early there. So it's okay, it's falling apart a little bit. Let me see if I can add in something kind of vaguely consistent under that. And again, for right now I'm thinking about both when I start the replace function and how long I play it for. So I'm thinking eighth notes primarily. Now I'm going to do quarter notes. Yeah, that's pretty good. You can hear those little artifacts, split seconds at the beginning and ends of notes where my timing was not totally on point. That's not necessarily the end of the world. And here, let's do this. Let's remultiply. Multiply that out a few times. Now I'm going to think about doing very, very short replace drops, just barely tapping it. That's not bad. Remultiply down again. Let's do a little more of that. So kind of a mixed bag. Some of it's pretty tight, some of it's pretty loosey-goosey. I'm going to try remultiplying again. And let's try this again. And I'm going to simplify, because when I get too fancy too quickly is when it starts getting sloppy. So I'm just going to think very simply. Not bad. And again, these are all really short button presses. I'm just thinking about very short staccato things. It's a little squirrely around here. And so I'm going to try and cover it up. Let's see. Yeah, not so great. That's a little better, yeah. Now let's do longer tones. Let's do eighth notes and quarter notes. That's okay. That's good, I guess I'm learning. And now let's talk about substitute. I saved this for third because substitute is kind of like a weird, unholy union between overdub and replace. You can access substitute from the front panel, the insert column, on the insert mode row on switches. Coming down here right now, it is set to replace. I'm going to change it to substitute, S-U-B. What happens with substitute is that when you use the function, it sounds like you're doing an overdub, but when you hear the function come back on every subsequent repetition, it sounds like replace. What? Much easier to demonstrate than to talk about. So here comes my handy dandy drone. Now I'm going to use substitute, and you'll hear as I'm using it, the drone does not cut out. You're not going to hear the drone being overwritten as I use the function. You can still hear it. But now it's gone. Let's do that some more. So when you're doing the effect, it doesn't overwrite the loop. But when it plays back, every time after that, it does overwrite the loop. This can be useful for various things. I mean, you could potentially overwrite the entire loop by holding it down one time, and you could still hear the whole loop while you're doing it. So you can cover up the whole thing. It can be easy to do that rhythmically precisely because you can hear the loop. If you get a longer kind of rhythm, just to quickly demonstrate, let's multiply that out a few times. If I was trying to do a long replace, switch this back to replace. It'll be a little trickier because as soon as I engage replace, I won't hear that pulse anymore. So if I try that, that's okay, you know, let's say I got lucky that time, but it's still a little tricky just because you can't really hear the thing that you're playing over. If we switch back to substitute, do my famous bass line thing again, multiply it out, let's do that for 8 cycles, and now because we switched the insert mode to substitute, you will hear the backing track when you're laying the stuff down. But when it plays back, you don't. So it can be a little easier to get stuff that's rhythmically precise because you can still hear the thing that you're overwriting before it plays back, which makes certain things a little easier. In other ways, it can make things a little trickier, in my experience. So if we go back to the kind of thing we were doing for replace, oh, it's set to sus, Andre, come on. For replace and overdub, for me, trying to drop the short snippets in here with substitute can actually be a little harder, because I find that without hearing it immediately overwrite the content, it can be a little tricky to feel where the beginning and end of the function is. Let me try it, see if that actually is the case. Yeah, that's okay, but especially on the release, it feels very strange to me. A little early there. That's alright. Gonna do eighth notes, or try to do eighth notes. I guess I'm doing quarter notes, never mind. Now I'm doing eighth notes. And you can hear I'm all over the place. This is not easy for me because I'm not used to using substitute. I'm used to hearing the cutoff and I'm used to kind of feeling the immediate cutoff that you get with replace. So if I was just doing this kind of thing, like completely overriding large sections, substitute's good for that and I can use it reasonably well, but if I try and do like the really short bursts of stuff, for me personally it's a lot harder. And again, you can still hear those little microscopic fragments of previous things at the beginning and end of notes. You know, whether or not you like that is a matter of taste. Generally, I kind of like it, but I also prefer that it can be deliberate rather than accidental because I hate myself. I don't really hate myself. So again, thinking in terms of eighth notes, both in terms of when I'm activating substitute, and also in terms of how long I'm holding the pedal down for. Let me shut up and see how that sounds. Okay, so it's a little hairy towards the end. A little better. Yeah, it's okay, but it's definitely pretty rough around the edges, so this is something I would benefit from practicing a lot. So let's say I want to practice it a lot, which I do. Let's bring it down, new loop length. Come on, Andre, learn how to use the EDP. Okay, gonna multiply this out 4 times, and I'm gonna
try and progress very slowly. I'm just going to do quarter notes to make life a little easier for me. That was a little early on the attack. Not the end of the world, but not great. Yeah, cut off a fraction early. That was better, can still get it a little longer. Not that long. Well, that was a decent half note. Yeah, this one I'm just goofing around. Let's try that one more time. Quarter notes. It's alright. Yeah, that's alright. So again, forcing myself to slow it down, do it simpler, work at more of the foundational stuff, it helps a lot. But also, as you can hear, this is stuff that I could definitely stand to sharpen my chops up on.
So the video I uploaded right before this was talking about rhythmic practice as well, but that was in a more kind of general instrumental sense. This, of course, is dealing more with EDP-specific functions, but a lot of the principles still apply, and if you didn't watch the previous video, shame on you. But also, if you didn't watch the previous video, long story short is that practicing takes time. Practicing is not about playing the stuff that we're good at, it's about working on the stuff we're not good at. So I was very much practicing in this video, and some of it did not sound great. And to me, the important thing about practice is that you're able to get better. You're able to find a way to figure out the stuff that you don't do well and then improve on it. And as you saw, there were a few moments in this video where I was able to improve just by looking at the stuff I wasn't doing. And generally what I find is if we step back, simplify things, slow it down, then usually we can get a better handle on it. And from there, it's a question of just bringing up the speed a little bit at a time until we can do it at the speed that we want to. And yes, certain techniques are going to change a bit physically when you bring them past a certain tempo, but I feel that the foundational stuff absolutely can be applied and put into place at a very slow tempo. So this is very much me following my own advice, and this is the type of thing that I find really helpful as a player when I practice to this day. As always, your mileage may vary, but I have found that this stuff is really useful, and I would humbly suggest that it might be worth a try. In any case, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Bye-bye.